Let's imagine that I'm the president, or you're talking to the president. I know you've been advising the Biden campaign. Is that correct?
I advised Biden on deepfakes 2 years ago when they
2 years
started
ago,
emerging.
pretty recent vintage. Um, what are the safeguards and countermeasures that we could install? Because a lot of people listening to this right now, Nina, are like, "Oh my gosh, like I give up. Like I think I'm watching Andrew Yang talk to Nina Schick, but maybe I'm not. Like this whole thing could just be like a giant fabrication, which it could be theoretically. How do we know? So you do make some suggestions, but would love to talk to you about what possible solutions look like. What could we do if, let's say, hypothetically, we have control of the government of the United States of America, 2021, we look up and say, all right, we have to address this problem.
Broadly, the solutions kind of fall into two categories. The first is the technical solutions. So building the AI software to detect video manipulations, because as
All right,
synthetic media.
so let's start with that, Nina. Like, let's say you're Russia and you make 100 synthetic media videos and audio recordings. Do we have the technology right now that could go through and be like fake, 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 and then there's like one real one in there and be like real?
So, right, ish is the answer, because there are several kind of deep fake detection tools, but given that they can be generated using different kind of machine learning systems, there's no one detection tool that can detect them all. And the other crazy thing about trying to build the detection tools is that every time you think you've built a really cool piece of software, AI software to detect all the fakes, you're giving the person who's making the fakes a foot up. So it's always going to be a cat and mouse game. So there are some tools out there. There's no one universal tool is the short answer.
Could you have a tool that gives you like a spectrum of probability where you could say this thing is probably real, this thing might be fake, within like a certain measure of confidence? I get that you can't categorically say real, fake, but you could be like, we think this one's probably real, or we think this one's probably fake.
Yeah. And that is how those detection tools work right now. The ones that are already out there, they're like, oh, this is 90% probably synthetic. But I would say that because we're just at the start of this synthetic media revolution, like we haven't actually come to the stage yet where it's ubiquitous. But in 4 years' time, when it is time for the next election, some experts who I speak to think that as much as 90% of video content online could be synthetic.
Oh gosh.
There is an urgency, which isn't, so it hasn't hit us yet, but in 4 years' time, we're looking at something completely different. I actually think this election is more likely to be disrupted by something called the liar's dividend. If everything can be faked, then everything can also be denied. And that is something called the liar's dividend. And you already see that happening now. And this is something that's only going to get more potent as time goes on. There's actually one candidate, a Republican candidate standing for Congress, who took the George Floyd video, that powerful video, which unleashed a movement not only across the US, but across the world. And she's written a 24-page document saying that it's a deep fake. So you're going to see a lot more of that.
Okay, so there isn't an easy technical fix. You can have some AI tools that catch some degree of synthetic media, or some proportion of it, but not enough where you can say problem solved. So what else? What else lies in the technical?
Okay, so that the first part of technical solutions is detection. The second part is provenance, right? So you actually try to prove what media is authentic, and this is going to become increasingly important for like activists, journalists, people who are trying to record something and hold someone either to account as a kind of human rights abuse or to show that what they have done is authentic. And you basically try and embed that into almost the hardware of your phone or your camera. It's almost like a watermark, which is indelible. You can't tamper it. So that always is shown to be authentic. So those are the kind of two technical solutions, detection and provenance. But ultimately, this isn't a technology problem in the sense that the technology here, we have fully sentient AI, which we don't, the technology is just an amplifier of human intention. So the real solution comes with policy, legal, digital literacy and education. This is something that just the technology isn't going to make go away. It's something that society needs to grasp as a national security, and I would say, one of the most important issues for the future of liberal democracy. So we need people like you who understand how technology is reshaping politics and society, and then can communicate that to the public in a way that they understand what's at stake here. Then only can I hope that there is kind of the political and public will galvanized in order to make this the priority, which I believe it needs to be, because I think there's a short window in which something can still be done. And otherwise, the kind of vested powers that benefit from the information ecosystem being the way that it is, it becomes increasingly difficult to do anything about it.
So right now in the United States, we have deep skepticism of the media. I think the trust in media that I saw most recently was 41%, the major media organizations. And it runs the gamut along party lines. So if you are a Democrat in the United States of America, you trust the national media at a higher level, let's call it 58% or 60%. And then independents are around 40%. And then Republicans are at something like 20%. So that's and it's been migrating downward over time. So that's where we are right now. So then if you go and say, look, we have to get our arms around this and establish what the heck is real and what's not real, like what's true and false, you have a significant proportion of the American people already that are like, whatever you're doing, like, I don't trust it. It's nonsense. Like, you're trying to control me, control us. And there's a very, very deep heritage in the U.S., which I agree with, freedom of the press, freedom of information, like censorship is terrible. And it seems like if you're trying to establish what's real or true, then what you're really trying to do is censor the heck out of a bunch of people. So that's like the current landscape. And then you go to them and say, no, look, this is a massive problem. Like, you don't even know if I'm real right now because I'm talking to you on like a video screen. So we would need to line up, in my view, major media organizations, major technology companies, nonprofits, and the government, and get everyone together and say, all right, like, let us try and establish some standards, some rules of the road to say that you have to use these devices, and if you don't use these devices, then it will be marked as don't know if this is real, and that can include our cell phones. So at least, if I take a cell phone video, it's attributed to me. And so it's not like you necessarily need to have a giant camera from CNN or wherever, but like there needs to be some provenance, to your point. There needs to be some kind of chain of ownership of this. And then someone like puts their name on it and says, yeah, I was there and that happened. So that's the challenge, is trying to bring that coalition together and then try and get this trust in whatever standards you establish to rise over time.
If you look at other places where society-wide mobilization to disinformation has been really effective, take, for example, the small Baltic state of Estonia, some 3 million people. They've often been in the eye of kind of Russian disinformation campaigns. And they've really turned it around by basically adopting what you just pointed out, which is a whole society-wide mobilization where you have kind of industry working with policymakers, working with citizens, working with NGOs. But taking that networked approach is really difficult. And I would say that if the current presidency continues in the United States, then that challenge becomes even more difficult, because what's quite clear is that the president has a vested interest in making sure that the information ecosystem is corroded. He is one of the biggest purveyors of disinformation. And if this continues for another 4 years, I find it difficult to see the way back for the United States.
No, that's the argument that so many people are making, is that we can't handle 4 more years of Trump. I happen to agree with that. I think that 4 more years of disintegration will lead us to a point where it's very difficult to come back. Though many people think of it for different reasons than what you're describing, Nina, but there have been folks who've said that U.S. democracy itself is on the line.
Yeah, and I don't think that's an exaggeration at all, because a democracy can only work, a liberal democracy can only work if you have some kind of objective reality and some commitment to truth and the pursuit of truth. If the pursuit of truth no longer matters, then the only thing that matters is power, and who has the power to control narratives. So that then ends up becoming very authoritarian.
You know what this is, Nina? Like, this is a problem that prevents us from solving other problems. And so that's where my attention is focused right now is we have to fix the machinery of democracy. And at this point, it's not enough to try and get the right people embedded into the machine. You have to try and fix the machine itself. Because right now, this machine is breaking down in a way that even if I stuck like a good person in Congress, it's not going to save us.
Absolutely. Focus on the architecture, the machine. I think we're absolutely on the same page here, Andrew.
I'm going to become the mechanic, Nina, and I know you are too. Thank you so much for edifying us. Nina's book is Deepfakes, The Coming Infocalypse. It's compelling, it's scary, and hopefully we will do something about it together. Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.